So the cameras that have been the most exciting for me in my career over the last like 2 years or so haven't been digital cameras. They've been a mix of analog formats. I got more in the last like 2 years. I've gotten more into shooting on 120 film for stills. I've gotten more into shooting 35 photo. I've gotten into Polaroids. Gotten into Super 8. I've gotten a 16 millimeter, which led me to purchase my SR2, which I'm sure I'll talk about in a future video or an episode of the show. But those have been the things that have been really exciting to me, and they've really changed the way that I look at my process and the images that I create. But another thing that I haven't really explored yet that's been kind of picking up steam is these sort of Sony sort of 2000s, 90s, 2000s era digicams. And I know there's a company that sort of made this popular. It's called Dangicam. I didn't originally hear about these guys from them. I had originally heard about them from a homie of mine. He's a director friend of mine. We've worked together on a few different projects on 16 millimeter and this Sony Digicam that he has, which I asked him if I could borrow for a few days just to sort of see and get an idea of what the format's like and sort of experiment with what its limitations are. And besides this, he's got a mix of some other cameras. I know he's got a VX1000 and he's got a Hi8 of some kind. I think that's this. Forgive me, I don't know 100% of what these cameras are and stuff, but I'll put a photo of the one that he let me test. And I had a really fun time with it. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it as much as I did, but I was really into it. So why mess with this format? I haven't touched it at all, and I've sort of seen it in some recent music videos as sort of like a B cam, like mixed media sort of thing. And I love, sort of that archived look, that sort of dirtied look. And I sort of love the, I don't think this is the case with every camera, but I sort of love the green, like night shots on these camcorders. I think they're really cool, and I just want to make myself familiar with them. And the homie Gus just happened to be one of those guys that was in my proximity that would allow me to sort of mess around with it for a few days. So that's kind of the blanket of like, okay, this is why I'm doing this, right? So that's sort of the blanket, like why and what my initial motivations were. And I think with this particular camera, I had some really interesting takeaways. So this particular camera is a Sony Digicam. So he has this little module called a PowerPlay, which basically lets you record to a micro SD card, and it lets you record on the camera without having to run tape, which is really cool. With this particular unit, I was able to record tape, and I did record some tape on it. I forgot to ask Gus to process it, so it's just kind of sitting on some tape. I think he ended up using it for another music video, but yeah. So I've shot both formats, the tapeless and the tape. They both feel kind of the same. I mean, there's kind of the obvious, like the tape, you can kind of feel the tape going through the system, kind of similar to film. You kind of, I think because you're aware of how finite it is, you sort of treat every shot like it's important, and you don't want to deliberately just run over a recording from something that you shot previously, which was kind of my fear, and I knew going into it that there was still some tape that he hadn't digitized on this particular tape. It's called Mini DV. So I didn't shoot a lot of tape. I think I shot like maybe a total of I don't know, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. A lot of my experimenting was on tapeless because I didn't want the limitation of having to worry about tape. At least in this instance, because I knew there was still something on it. I think had there not been anything written, I think I would have just like just blown through the tape like no problem. But I had a lot of fun. I was like pretty excited about the format, and it sort of opened my eyes to what work could be and sort of what things you can make with it. I think initially I was going into it being like, oh, this would be really cool for like a Blair Witch sort of project. But then, obviously Gus and I got to talking and he's kind of showing me the world of like, there's the Mini DV, there's the Hi8s, and then there's like tube cameras, and there's all these sorts of things that you can really get into with this sort of format of like tape and digital, early digital cameras. And it sort of opened my eyes to like, oh wow, you can really do a lot with this. I guess a recent example is there's a recent, forgive me, I don't know the exact video, but there's an Olivia Rodrigo video where they shoot on like this big mansion, and they shot on these tube cameras, and he was kind of showing me those, and it's like, you see the feel of this, like, in your world there's this idea of like, okay, you can just emulate film, which is true. And the way he was explaining it to me was like, you experiment with this is the same thing. Like, it's just a different tool to try and tell a story rather than trying to replicate these sort of imperfections in post. You just get them. And that's always my thought too. I'm like, if you have the ability to shoot in a certain format, in a certain type of analog media, let's do it. Like let's really go all the way in with it. And I think I guess the main pro was like seeing, okay, you have the night mode that could be like a really cool sort of like Don Toliver type music video or something. But then you have the main. I love the ability to do like slow. I know it's been really popular in like car culture to get like the really slow zooms on like some cars and stuff, and I like the idea of it being like a home video sort of feel, and that you can almost like not see through it. Like, I think the format allows you to kind of hide a lot, whereas like film has like a lot of resolving power, and of course it has like a certain quality to it, and it's pretty soft as far as like skin tones and that sort of thing, compared to digital where like everything is like super sharp and almost like perfect in a weird way. I think this kind of allows you to have imperfections and to feel a little more stylized, and it allows you to create a unique sort of flair to the piece that you're creating. So that was sort of my main takeaways. It really opened up my eyes to the potential of this format. So I'm going to mention dislikes, and I'm not saying this as a way to say like, oh fuck this format, I would never shoot on it. I hated it or whatever. Like, I would maybe preface this by saying like this is something. These are some things that I kind of ran into and was like, oh, that's interesting. So now I know going into shooting this format that I will run into these sorts of things, or maybe I have a compromise that I can, or maybe I have a solution for a problem that comes up. I want to be familiar and I want to be prepared for some potential solutions. One of the things that I'm not blaming Gus for this. He had kind of prefaced before giving me the camera that this was an issue. I'm going to explain this in the way that I receive the information, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to translate the information to you. I don't know the specifics, so bear with me for a second. The tapeless recorder, the PowerPlay, has an input that goes into it, and then it has two outputs on the other end for both video and audio. But something happened when you plugged in both. It just wouldn't send a signal, so you can only plug in one like halfway in order to get both video and sound. And it was a very specific way that you had to plug it in, because it's one of those auxiliary plugs where it has 3 lines on it. I forget what the technical term is. I think it's like TRS versus TTRS or something like that. Please do your own research. I don't really know 100%. But I had to kind of stick it a certain way. I had to make sure that it was plugged in a certain way, to where it ended up having to stick out at that last ring closest to the barrel of the cable, or closest to the end of the cable. So I had to really make sure it was dialed a certain way so that I can get sound out of this clip. Otherwise, it would be just the video, which, unfortunately, because of how specific I needed to be, I was never really able to get the audio to work. I think I got it to work on like 1 or 2 test clips, but other than that, the tape obviously worked fine, because you're not running into the issue of like having to adapt it to something, because it has, the internal mic, and it has the ability to write literally whatever. So the tape clips, there was no issue. Even when I played them back, I was able to play them with their full audio and stuff. But because of that issue, I sort of realized, okay, this is maybe something I should be aware of. If I get on a production with one of these, I should have a replacement cable handy. That being said, Gus did order another one, and that issue is resolved, so this is a non-issue. But it was something that it was something that was brought to my attention, and I thought that was really interesting, how you kind of have to route the cabling a certain way in order to get the visual and the audio. I thought that was really cool. I couldn't really navigate the menu system. I got really lucky that the the green, like, night vision, it's called night shot on these Sony cameras, and I got really lucky that it was just a lever next to my finger, next to like my ring finger, so I could turn it on or turn it off very easily. And so that, because I was able to read it, it made sense to me, and that was very easy to flick on. I say that because the rest of the camera was in Japanese, and I think because he bought the camera like overseas, he bought the camera from Japan or something. I believe he like shipped it over from eBay or something. That was, I couldn't really experiment. I couldn't really see what the menus are doing. I don't know what kind of settings I could change, really, because I couldn't understand Japanese, and I also didn't think to, when I tried to translate it with the camera, because in Google Translate you have like a camera that you can point it at. It still wasn't like it would translate chunks of things, and it wouldn't translate all the menus. Sometimes it would just be the same text but in a different font. So I ran into issues of like understanding the menus and sort of the capability of the camera. And albeit, yeah, it's meant for like home video and stuff, but I wanted to experience the full breadth of what I felt like this was capable of, and I didn't really. I felt like I couldn't, because I didn't understand some of the menus, and I don't know anybody who speaks Japanese, so I couldn't, really. I didn't have anything to go off of, so I was just kind of shooting blind with the settings that were on the camera, like as is. So that was kind of my again, not even really a con. It was just like me wanting to develop literacy with this camera system. Those two things kind of felt like a roadblock. But other than that, like I had a really fun time. I think it's really cool to see people experimenting with some of these older digicams. I think they have a really interesting look and can add a lot depending on the project, especially music videos. I think it's like a really fun. For a lot of music videos I do, there's a lot of mixed media, whether it's like our A cam is digital and we have like a Super 8 or a Digicam. There's been projects where I've shot 16 millimeter and we had 35 photos as an addition, but we also had this Digicam. It's been a really interesting process. It's been a really interesting medium to experiment with, and I'll probably be using this camera more on something in the future. Hopefully, this was beneficial to somebody. I think a lot of times with filmmakers, we tend to when we think of analog formats, we think of film. But I think these sort of 90s, 2000s digital cameras, tube cameras, broadcast cameras are also another type of analog media that I think is under, that I think in my world, I'd love to experiment with more. I'll get more into my SR2 on this next video, or on the anniversary special of the show. I've got a few things lined up, so you'll see more of that. But I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.